To answer this question, let's do a quick review of some grammar basics. First off, a clause is something that has a subject and a verb. An independent clause has a subject and a verb and sounds like it can be its own sentence. For instance, John jumped. A dependent clause has a weak conjunction at the front. So instead of saying John jumped, it might sound like since John jumped. And the word since keeps us from being able to have a period there. Now, if you have an independent clause followed by a dependent clause, that's going to get no comma. For instance, John jumped because he had shoes. So independent, dependent, no comma. If you have the dependent first, you get a comma. Because John had shoes, he jumped. So in this situation, while one requires oxygen and one does not, in the first part there, we have a dependent clause. So one requires oxygen and one does not. That makes it a clause. One is the subject and requires is the verb. A lot of people wouldn't want to think of that as a clause because it has a general pronoun, but that's okay. It may not be good writing sometimes if you have a general pronoun, but it still fits the requirements of being a clause. Now, when we put the while in the front, that's what makes it dependent. So just like going from John jumped to because John jumped, here it's one requires versus while one requires. So all of this is a dependent clause. And if we start with answer choice C, it would say aerobic and anaerobic respiration are both forms of cellular respiration. So that right there would be an independent clause. The respiration types are, that's our subject and our verb. By the way, the words is, was, are, am, were, be, have, has, had. Those are 9 important verbs that you should know. They're little linking verbs that are easy to ignore. So you've got a dependent followed by an independent, and that part is okay. Then we have this long dash leading into the next part of the sentence. So let's quickly review some special punctuation rules. For the semicolon, you have 2 independent clauses. For instance, John jumped, semicolon, he fell. For the colon, the first part is independent and the second part is anything that describes the first part. There was only one thing Scooby could do, run. Now we underline the word anything there because it could be a full sentence, it could be a few words, it could be a single word, as long as it's describing the first part. And then for the long dash, 1 long dash is a colon and 2 long dashes is a set of parentheses. So there was only one thing Scooby could do, long dash, run, or Scooby, who had been in this situation many times before, ran. So there in the second part, you have 2 long dashes functioning as a set of parentheses with what we refer to as a middle modifier in the middle. In any case, if we take a long dash here and lead into a little description, that is, their processes by which cells break down glucose to use as energy, that's okay because we're using 1 long dash as a colon. So we've got a full sentence, dependent and independent clause following each other in that order. And then we've got a colon into a little description. So it loosely follows this definition right here. The first part is an independent clause, or we can substitute that with something that could stand fully on its own, like a dependent followed by an independent. And then the second part is describing the first part. That is, they're the processes by which cells break down glucose to use as energy. So all that said, the answer here is C.